Athletics is one of the most rigorously drug-tested modern-day sports. Now, you might laugh at that statement depending on which side of the spectrum you lean on, but I promise it's true. And with lots of testing comes lots of ridiculous, dumb, and outright unbelievable excuses when caught. All the way from drinking shampoo, to penis enlargement pills, and injecting pigs with steroids. Some of these were high profile enough you may have heard of them, but I guarantee you have not heard them all. So today, I'm going through my favorite drug ban evasion excuses, and while we're at it, I'm going to rate each excuse on a tier list based on how good I think it was. LaShawn Merritt has the resume of a 400-meter great. 3 global titles in Beijing, Berlin, and Moscow, as well as too many medals to count in relays or just being on the podium in general. But in 2010, backdating tests from October of 2009, immediately after a gold medal win at the Berlin World Championships, he would get popped for DHEA and pregnenolone, receiving a 2-year suspension that would be reduced because of his excuse, by taking over-the-counter weenie enlargement pills. Specifically, Extends if you're looking for some performance enhancing yourself. Hot tip, these don't work. So what was originally a 2-year ban was reduced to 21 months, a reduced sentence of 3 months. Which isn't a lot, but it was just enough mercy to allow him to compete at the 2011 US Trials and World Championship, basically only barring him from 1 full year of competition instead of 2. And my favorite quote of his at the time was, "What I took, I am sure that a lot of men out there take." No man, you're not normalized penis enlargement pills, come on. As an excuse, this is a complicated one to rate. In one way, it's got to be high up there. He achieved the reduced sentence. But in saying that, now everyone thinks he's struggling with problems down there. So, it's a solid B tier. Did the job at the cost of some pride. Also, he just so happened to be coached by the Green Machine Dennis Mitchell. Now, Mitchell was not only consistently among the US's top sprinters in the 90s, with an Olympic bronze and 2 World Championship bronzes consecutively, and he was also part of that 1988 Olympic final, which they were all caught doping, but his excuse game was just as good as his running. In 1998, near the end of his peak, Mitchell would be caught with an abnormally high testosterone level. And his excuse, 5 bottles of beer and sex with his wife 4 times. Specifically quoted, "It was the lady's birthday, she deserved a treat." He said this to a disciplinary panel, and I'm not even so sure if this was an excuse as much of it was an admission of guilt, considering high amounts of alcohol actively lowers testosterone. That's a tip for all you young guns out there, don't drink too much. So considering how Mitchell's head was filled with rocks, it's extremely impressive of how good of a coach he's become. Today, coaching the strongest sprinting group in the US. So while I'm thoroughly impressed by his coaching, man, this excuse speaks for itself. We're this early in, and hands down, it cannot get worse than this. Bottom of F tier, the science is off, he was never getting away with it, and it amazes me, after this fiasco, he was able to work his way to an official US track and field relay coach for a couple years. David Martinez was a relatively successful Spanish discus thrower in the 90s. He competed at 3 Olympics, had a personal best a bump ahead of 65 meters, but didn't really crack into the medal conversation, or anywhere near it for that matter. In fact, his claim to fame was his 1997 drug ban, in which he tested positive for nandrolone. Martinez would become the pioneer of modern-day doping excuses. He claimed contaminated pork was the reason for his positive drug test. Quite a few athletes have tried their luck with the same excuse in modern day, to mixed results. But Martinez would go the extra mile to prove his innocence with an at-home science experiment. Those are his words, not mine. He would inject a pig with nandrolone daily for 6 months, slaughter it, then eat it, and retake his drug tests voluntarily. And the result? His tests came up completely clear, his plan backfiring, instant 2-year ban. Honestly, you gotta give it to him. The founder of one of the greatest excuses in drug ban avoidance. Eating meat. A real innovative mind of his era. This excuse should be an S tier considering it is used today, but the moment he so overconfidently drugged a pig, ate it, and demanded another test just to fail, he shot himself in the foot. I'll give it a B tier and some advice. He should have continued drugging himself with the pig to ensure a positive test. And lo and behold, someone would actually do that. Dieter Bauman is one of Germany's most revered distance runners, winning gold at the 1992 Olympics in the men's 5K and silver in 1988, 40 meters behind the legendary John Ngugi. He was also just a top 5 runner on any given day during his era. But in 1999, nearing the end of his career, like many others on this list, he would get popped for nandrolone. So, a 2-year ban looming over him, he would of course deny, and instead voluntarily offer to retake tests multiple times per day, in which they would find extremely high levels of nandrolone in his system multiple times per day, although it was said levels would fluctuate. But this was all according to his plan, because his excuse that it was all in his toothpaste, claiming a spooky mystery man had been spiking it, and that's why he was regularly checking positive, and his tests would fluctuate based on time of day, highest immediately after brushing his teeth. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt. How does someone spike his toothpaste so regularly without being found out? Because that's exactly it. There would be no suspect in the case of the spiker. And here's the other kicker, the IAAF would investigate his toothpaste, confirming nandrolone in it, but the amount was inconsistent with how much would actually show up in his urine samples. Basically, like I advised, he was continuing to dope up while spiking his own toothpaste to try get away with it. And he didn't. But I do gotta say, as an excuse, proper good effort. He learned from what his doping compatriot Martinez failed to do with his piggy injecting experiment, and took it all the way. So yeah, he butchered the numbers, still lost the case, and embarrassed himself severely in the process. But I saw the vision. Easily the top of B tier. Only not any higher because it still didn't work. Konstantinos Kenteris and Kenteris Thanou were 2 of Greece's greatest sprinters and serious medal contenders at the hometown 2004 Athens Olympics. Kenteris was defending Olympic 200 meter champion and a world champion, while Thanou had medaled at the last 4 global championships. These 2 were under some heavy spotlights. But a day prior to the opening ceremony, both would miss a drug test which would usually result in a 2-year ban. So in the heat of the moment, they concocted a plan. Fake a motorcycle accident. Already, sounds way too complicated. They would have to crash a motorcycle, hurt themselves, pay witnesses and doctors for testimonies. So, of course, it fell apart very quickly. Immediately, the scandal was so big in Greek media, they had to withdraw from the games before a verdict was heard. They did name a crash site, but police found no evidence of an accident, and additionally, witnesses' stories didn't line up either. None of this went to plan at all. So this excuse failed so hard. They didn't compete from the moment it left their lips. They received their 2-year ban, and in 2005, there were criminal charges brought forth, which resulted in a perjury charge in 2011. You could not have fucked up more, and in turn, it effectively ended both of their careers. Hard F tier, but still maybe not as bad as sex and alcohol. And while the Greek government fought hard to charge these 2, in Cuba, the government fights for you. In 1999, after the Pan American Games, a little-known character by the name of Javier Sotomayor was banned for usage of cocaine. Sotomayor was Cuba's prized athlete, the legendary high jump world record holder, the only man ever to jump over 8 feet, as well as a multiple global champion. He would usually get a 2-year ban for this cocaine offense, and quite frankly, between you and me, it's basically known he was using the stuff, but he claimed innocence, and let his government do the talking. At first, it started with the Cuban Communist Party posting in a newspaper, explaining how his ban was an effort concocted by the CIA or anti-Castro mafia, who were using these 1999 Pan American Games as a prime opportunity to spike Cuba's top athletes and get them banned before the 2000 Olympics. And as word spread, Cuba's leader at the time, Fidel Castro, would get involved. Now I'm not going to say much about Fidel Castro, but let's put it this way. Him simply asking the IAAF to cut Sotomayor's ban in half was enough for them to make it happen. Now rating this one is a little difficult, because yeah, Sotomayor didn't actually say much, but sometimes that's the best course of action. S tier because the Cuban government said so. Daniel Plaza was an Olympic champion race walker in 1992, and to his credit, he had a pretty consistent career at the top, but after the 1996 Spanish champs, he would get popped for nandrolone. And unlike Martinez, who cried eating pork, Plaza claimed it was from eating his wife. Man, this one isn't a video for the kids. He was first sanctioned a 2-year ban, but appealed it on grounds that pregnant women have increased nandrolone levels, which can be transferred orally. That, and he went on to pass further drug tests around the same time, which a drug like nandrolone should take at least 3 months to clear. So, he won his case. But does this mean he wasn't doping? Not really, but the main thing, it does create enough plausibility. So yeah, I mean, that's got to be pretty up there. A tier at least. But our first ban evaded. And then there's Paul Edwards. Not only was he a child actor in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but he was also an elite shot putter. He medaled at the 1990 Commonwealth Games held in New Zealand, competed at 2 Olympics, and was popped twice for a cocktail of drugs. This man was taking everything there was, so he was subsequently banned for life, with not much fuss, except for a rumor. And I just want to say, besides it being a rumor, there is absolutely zero backing to this claim. But as time has gone on, it's now been cited multiple times in several different articles. His excuse was, he drank a whole bottle of shampoo. This one is just stupid. The story hasn't even managed to keep straight over time. Sometimes drinking the shampoo was an attempt to mask PEDs, and in others, he uses downing the shampoo as an excuse for the reason he got popped. Yeah, I don't get it. Regardless, both are awful reasons. And looking further, he seems to have tried to appeal his lifetime ban in 2013 for botched testing. I think this one is more fiction than fact. F tier. Fatima Maama-Yvelain was a French distance runner in the 2000s, and was relatively unknown. She has 6 French national titles in the 10 and 5k, and she did qualify for an Olympic once. But it seems she was more suited for cross country, placing top 10 in the world twice. And at the tail end of her career in 2012, she would get popped for a distance running classic, EPO. This happened right after a low stakes half marathon race in France, so of course, she hits them with one of the most generic excuses in the book. After bouts of torrential rain, the water streaming over the road must have washed through unidentified medical waste. This medical waste just happened to contain EPO, which, while running through these puddles, had splashed up her shoes and soaked her shorts, tainting her urine sample. So they tested her shorts, which she eagerly agreed to, and then banned her for 2 years. She was 43 when this happened, which really questions the validity of the rest of her career. And as for rating the excuse, S tier for creative writing, but for getting out of trouble, that is a certified shitter. D tier at best. To be fair, at 43 she probably didn't care anymore, which is what I would say if she didn't come back after the ban and run for 4 more years. But what's not fiction is what happened at the 2023 Delhi Athletics Championship. In a city of 30+ million people, 8 people qualified for the 100-meter final, but only 1 would end up participating. Because the day prior, it was announced the National Anti-Doping Agency would be there to test athletes. And this one is just disgusting. Images of syringes in bathrooms, and this is real footage of their 100-meter championship, by the way. And in one case, a doping officer reportedly had to chase a girl in the junior steeplechase event who continued running even after crossing the finish line. This isn't really the same as the rest of the video, but way too ridiculous not to mention it or acknowledge it at least once on the channel. Clearly, not turning up or just running away has to take the lone S tier spot. You can't talk yourself into a corner or get caught at all if you just don't turn up. So here is the finalized list of my top 10 favorite doping excuses. So, what can we take away from all these stories? If track athletes were smart, they wouldn't need elaborate excuses. They would be freely doping in other sports and getting a bigger paycheck. I'm looking at you, NBA and NFL.